Neuro-implanted machines for the protection of humans, or the NIMPH, are the nanomachines that can be found inside the brains of Nikkes. Now, despite its unknown origin, the NIMPH is easily one of the most important pieces of technology in the world of Nikke. And it's because the NIMPH is what makes it possible for humans to be turned into Nikkes, as explained by Cecil.
NIMPH is injected into you when you're still human, and it proceeds to make a copy of all the memories stored in your brain. That information is processed, after which you're made into a Nikke.
After the person has been turned into a Nikke, the NIMPH becomes responsible for controlling memories and any other information inside the Nikke's brain, which the NIMPH is able to do thanks to its ability to manipulate synaptic connections. This control of information is divided into three major functions, which are erase, remember, and write.
Phoo. So, where do you want to kiss today?
Erase is pretty much self-explanatory as it refers to the NIMPH's ability to erase information inside the brain, which it does by breaking synaptic connections. Obviously, this function is what makes it possible to perform memory wipes on Nikkes, the punishment that was passed down to Rappi and Mihara back in Chapter 4.
To prevent such cases from reoccurring in the future, I hereby pronounce the following sentence. Given that Rappi and Mihara, the captains of counters and warders, were the primary instigators behind this incident, they shall have their memories erased. That is all.
But even though it's sometimes used as a punishment, the main use of memory wipes in the arc is to actually help Nikkes forget their traumatic experiences from the battlefield, because doing so lowers the chances of them going through a mind switch while also allowing them to regain their courage to continue fighting the Raptors. Forgetting traumatic experiences is also the reason why there are Nikkes who voluntarily go through a memory wipe, as revealed to us by Scarlet.
Be it to escape the horrors of the battlefield or debilitating depression. There are many Nikkes who voluntarily undergo a memory wipe. Above all, the very existence of NIMPH grants Nikkes a form of eternity life. Against this infinity, the horrors of the battlefield do not seem so abominable. It gives them the courage required to take on tough missions.
Additionally, memory wipes are also used to cure Nikke corruption, because performing a memory wipe to a Nikke 3 hours after they've been corrupted will also remove the corruption code that was implanted into their NIMPHs, although we still haven't seen this happen yet in the story.
I'm sleepy. Be my pillow, will you?
Remember is the NIMPH's ability that Ixia compares to a game's autosave system, because just like how autosaves creates backup of your game progress, the NIMPH can also create a sort of save point for the Nikke's memories. Now, you may not know this, but not all cases of memory wipe completely erases all of the Nikke's memories, because there are also cases like Ixia's in Chapter 4 where the only casualty from her memory wipe was half a day's worth of memories. And it's all thanks to this function, because what happened in Ixia's case was that after her memory wipe, her NIMPH simply loaded the latest backed up information it created, which in this case was a memory point that was created half a day before her memory wipe. Unlike in a complete memory wipe where the NIMPH loads the very first backed up information it made from when the Nikke was first created. This function is also the reason why Nikkes who went through complete memory wipes still retain some basic information in their brains, like their combat data as well as the ability to walk and talk. Unlike Marian who went through a neural wipe and was reverted into an infant-like state. This process of erasing memories and loading memory points can be repeated infinitely as long as the brain is physically unharmed. This cycle is also the reason why the NIMPH is said to grant Nikkes a form of immortality, because thanks to this, Nikkes can continue fighting with a lower risk of having a mind switch triggered by traumatic memories, thus making it possible to continuously deploy them to the battlefield without breaking their minds. Because a Nikke's broken body can be fixed or even replaced, but not a broken mind. Now, I know that there are people who were under the assumption that the NIMPH granting Nikke's immortality meant that NIMPhless Nikkes can't be resurrected if they died. But we know that this is not the case because Rappi died in Chapter 2 but was later revived in the very same chapter despite not having a NIMPH. Although, I do think that having a strong mental fortitude is a big factor for Rappi's revival, because most Nikkes probably can't handle the trauma triggered by the memory of their own death, and they'll probably just end up having a mind switch after being fixed.
I bought a new notebook! I'll be able to write down all my memories here.
Write is the third function of the NIMPH, which refers to the NIMPH's ability to write or input information directly into the brain. In fact, once a person has been turned into a Nikke, the basic information they need to be effective in combat, as well as other information to help them survive on the surface, are all entered into their brain thanks to this function. A good example of this would be in Dorothy's interview during her inclusion into the God Squad, where she was able to break simulation records even though she has zero combat experience, and this interview being the very first time she's ever fired a gun in her entire life. But just to be clear, Dorothy is somewhat of a special case because other Nikkei still need to go through proper training before they can apply this data into actual combat. It just so happens that Dorothy is a natural born genius who can immediately apply this data into combat without going through training. This is also one of the reasons why there's a rivalry between her and OG Scarlet, as they are a classic example of the talent versus hard work trope. Of course, it's also possible to input new information into the NIMPH as shown in Crow's Bond story, where Enoch made a new directive that's going to be written into the NIMPHs of every Nikkei in the arc. However, this function is also what makes the NIMPH vulnerable to corruption, because if you don't know, corruption comes in the form of a code that is written into the NIMPH.
I will have plenty of use for you in the future, Your Grace.
The NIMPH also has a sort of automatic function that helps Nikkeis adapt to trauma, which it does by doing the usual erase and memory point loading combo but with the additional step of writing a new non-traumatic version of the erased memory. I'll try not to spoil the details that much, but an example of this is a Nikkei who died in chapter 24. Her death is obviously a very traumatic memory for her, so her NIMPH erased those memories and replaced it with a different version of the events where she never died. And speaking of the NIMPH's auto-adapt function, I also want to suggest that perhaps the Pina in Dorothy's mind in Overzone was the creation of her NIMPH. Because just like in the other example, Dorothy's traumatic memory, which in this case is Pina's death, was also erased from her mind. But since the NIMPH can't explain why Pina is no longer around, it created a fake Pina inside of Dorothy's mind to make up for Pina's absence.
You're a good person. Try and keep it that way.
The NIMPH also acts as an inhibitor for Nikkeis, thanks to a code written into it that focuses on Nikkei behavior. Now, there's actually a bunch of directives that fall under this behavior code, but I'll just focus on the most important one, which is the directive that prevents Nikkeis from harming humans. This directive is the reason why Nikkeis are normally powerless against humans despite them being superior in every way. This is also the reason why Heavenly Ascension and the central government were sending human troops when they were trying to capture Marian in chapter 14 after Burningham's attempt was foiled by Anderson. But I said normally because according to Cecil, the NIMPH is actually very inconsistent when it comes to enforcing this directive.
Some can't lay a finger on a human, whereas others can go as far as firing suppression bullets at them. Of course, none of them can kill a human outright.
However, not all Nikkeis who was an NIMPH has their inhibitors turned on, because some squads like Pearly Siege in the Underworld Queens has theirs turned off. For Pearly Siege, the reason is quite obvious as they wouldn't be able to perform their duties if their inhibitors were turned on. And for the Underworld Queens, the reason is because they need to hide the fact that they are actually Nikkeis. I mean, it would be weird if a Mafia boss like Rosanna can't harm a human. Now, I don't know if the same is true for every commander, but our main protagonist has been shown to have the authority to turn off the inhibitors of the Nikkeis under his command. Unfortunately, the best example is a spoiler.
I hope this place doesn't chew you up and spit you out like the others. I usually don't care about this kind of stuff, but it's different with you.
Now, of course, we will also discuss the Nikkeis who were able to bypass their inhibitors by using some tricks. First is Crow, who used an iron plate to make the bullet ricochet to the commander. And second is Rose, who used a red blindfold to cover her eyes when cutting down her own commander. But just to be clear, not every Nikkei can do what Rose and Crow did by simply copying their methods, because what actually happens is that the NIMPH reacts to the Nikkei's thoughts of wanting to harm humans. Once the NIMPH detects said thoughts, it will automatically prevent the Nikkei from acting it out. Here's an explanation from the expert herself.
Let me give you a tip. You've got to disassociate from the act itself. Think of it like this. You're just shooting an object beside me. You're not actually shooting me. Don't think too much about the rest. Like, I might hurt her or even kill her. Nope. Now, concentrate and do what you have to do. The NIMPH has branded those images in your mind. Focus and cast them out. Then you can shoot.
This is also the reason why Rose needed a red blindfold, and it's because Rose used it to trick her mind into thinking that she is cutting down a Rapture instead of her own commander, because red is the color of glowing Rapture cores.
Violence is always the answer.
So that's it for the NIMPH's functions. If you are confused about anything or simply have some questions about the video or anything Nikke related, please feel free to ask and I'll try my best to provide the answer.